The Valderan Empire had stood for 6,000 years. It had consumed 42 star systems, absorbed 19 civilizations, and reduced 7 others to cautionary footnotes in its own historical records. Its military doctrine was elegant in the way that glaciers are elegant, slow, inevitable, and indifferent to whatever happened to be in the way. Its emperors had names that took 30 seconds to pronounce and bloodlines that stretched back to the first expansion, when Valderan warships had crossed the dark between galaxies like thrown spears. It ended because of one rule. One Terran. One rule. And the catastrophic miscalculation of assuming that the rule was a formality. Princess Ethan Valdori was 17 years old and had never, in her life, been in a room without guards. She had never particularly noticed this until the Terran arrived. His name was Corporal James Adeyemi, on secondment from the Terran Federation's Diplomatic Protection Corps, assigned as a gesture of goodwill during the trade negotiations between humanity's expanding frontier and the Valderan outer systems. He was not large by the standards of the imperial court, where guards were selected for the specific quality of being architecturally intimidating. He stood perhaps 6 feet, had a quiet face that gave very little away, and had been given, by his commanding officer, a single formal directive when the assignment was handed down. Don't let anything happen to the princess. He had distilled this, privately, into something shorter. Don't touch the princess. He posted it nowhere. He said it to no one. He simply held it in the front of his mind the way a navigator holds a fixed star, as the point everything else was oriented around. The princess noticed him because he was the first guard who had ever looked at the room instead of at her. "You're not watching me," she said, 3 days into his posting, in the tone of someone identifying an anomaly. "I'm watching everything else," Adeyemi said. "You're not the threat." She blinked. In 6,000 years of imperial tradition, no one had ever said anything like that to her. She found, to her considerable surprise, that she liked it. Grand Vizier Soreth had been managing the imperial court for 30 years, which meant he had been managing its power structures, its alliances, its betrayals, and its particular ecology of ambition for 30 years. He was very good at it. He had a gift for identifying the precise point at which pressure became leverage, and he had been applying pressure to the trade negotiations with the Terran Federation for 6 weeks with the comfortable confidence of a man playing a game he had already won. The Federation wanted access to the Valderan transit corridors. The Empire wanted 23 things the Federation had and was not yet willing to give. Soreth intended to extract them one at a time, at intervals, the way one extracts teeth, slowly, and with full appreciation for the patient's discomfort. He had not accounted for the guard. He became aware of the guard as a factor on the 40th day of negotiations, when he attempted to apply a more direct form of leverage. The princess was not a party to the negotiations. She was, however, a symbol of imperial continuity, and symbols, in Soreth's long experience, were useful tools. He sent 3 men to the princess's chambers at the 3rd hour of the night cycle. They were not assassins. He was not, yet, at the point of requiring that particular instrument. They were simply meant to frighten her. A princess who was frightened was a princess who communicated that fear to her father the emperor, and an emperor whose daughter was frightened was an emperor who renegotiated from a position of emotional compromise. It was a very clean plan. The 3 men did not return. Soreth received the report at dawn. He read it twice. Then he called in the man who had delivered it and asked him to explain, slowly, what incapacitated meant in this specific context. What it meant, it transpired, was that Corporal James Adeyemi had heard them come through the service corridor, had heard them. The report emphasized, not seen them. The motion sensors had not triggered, which meant he had identified the threat by sound alone in a completely dark room, and had been standing between them and the princess's door before they reached the junction. There had been no weapons drawn. Adeyemi's sidearm had remained holstered throughout. He had used, the report stated with the bewildered precision of someone documenting something they did not fully understand, only his hands. 3 men. Valderan household guard, trained, combat vetted. Each outweighing the Terran by at least 40 pounds. 40 seconds. The princess had not woken up. Soreth sat with this information for a long time. Then he made the decision that would cost the Empire everything, because he was a man who had spent 30 years winning by escalation, and he did not know how to interpret a variable he had not encountered before, so he interpreted it the only way he knew, as a problem requiring more force. He sent 12 men the following week. This was, in retrospect, the error, not because 12 was too many or too few, but because it demonstrated a fundamental misreading of what Adeyemi was. Soreth had looked at the reports and concluded he was dealing with a skilled individual. Exceptional, perhaps, but fundamentally quantifiable. Add more men. Adjust the variable. Solve for the same outcome. He had not understood that he was not dealing with a variable at all. He was dealing with a principle. Corporal James Adeyemi had one rule. Don't touch the princess. Not a rule that bent when circumstances became complicated. Not a rule that had a threshold above which it renegotiated. A rule that existed in the same category as gravity, not as a preference, but as a description of how reality was organized. 12 men entered the East Corridor at 0200 hours. When the dawn shift arrived, they found Adeyemi sitting in the corridor outside the princess's door with his back against the wall, and a split lip he was pressing a cloth to, and 12 Valderan guardsmen distributed across 40 meters of hallway in various states of incapacity, and the door behind him closed, and inside the room, the princess sleeping undisturbed. He looked up when the shift commander arrived. "You should send a medic," he said, and nodded at the men on the floor. "Some of them need one." What happened next happened quickly, by the slow standards of imperial politics. The princess woke to find Adeyemi being detained by imperial security on the orders of the vizier, and she walked into the detention chamber in her mourning robes with her hair unbound, and told them, in a voice that had been trained since birth to carry the absolute weight of imperial bloodline, to release him. They did not. She sent word to her father. The emperor, who had been told by Soreth a carefully edited version of the corridor incidents, received an unedited version from his daughter, who had reviewed the security footage herself. The emperor summoned Soreth. Soreth had survived 30 years at court because he understood which way the power ran at any given moment. He understood, in the emperor's audience chamber with Adeyemi standing against the far wall with his split lip and his still, watchful face, that it had run somewhere he had not predicted. The emperor was a man who had prosecuted wars and administered the absorption of 19 civilizations. He was not sentimental, but he had one daughter, and she was standing beside him with the security footage in her hand, and she was looking at the Terran guard with the specific expression of someone who has discovered something rare. "He stopped 12 of my men," the emperor said to Soreth. Not angrily. Emperors of long standing had learned that anger was imprecise. He said it the way he said actuarial figures, using his hands. "He is an anomaly," Soreth began. "He is a Terran," the emperor said, "and you sent 12 men against him to frighten my daughter, which means you sent 12 men against him to leverage me." He paused. "You have served this court for 30 years, Soreth. In that time, how many times have I been successfully leveraged?" Soreth said nothing. There was nothing to say. The Grand Vizier was removed from his position that afternoon. The specific charges involved the unauthorized deployment of household guard against a diplomatic protection officer, which was, under the terms of the draft trade agreement, an act with the technical classification of armed aggression against a Federation representative. The Federation's negotiating team, informed of this classification, was very understanding about it. They were also, their lead negotiator noted gently, now in a rather different position regarding the transit corridor terms. The new terms were signed 6 days later. 22 of the 23 things Soreth had been extracting, one at a time, over 6 weeks, were removed from the agreement entirely. Adeyemi was given a commendation by the Federation and a formal medal by the Emperor, who met him in private and studied him for a long moment the way old rulers studied things they were trying to understand. "What were you thinking?" the Emperor asked finally, when they came. The 12. Adeyemi considered the question. He was a man who did not spend words unnecessarily. "I was thinking about the rule," he said. "One rule. That's all it needed to be." The Emperor looked at him for a long time. 6,000 years of empire. 42 star systems. 19 civilizations absorbed and administered and recorded. And here was this quiet man from a small blue planet at the unfashionable edge of the galaxy, with a split lip and a cloth pressed to it, and a single rule that had held against 12 trained soldiers in a dark corridor without once considering whether it would. "Your people are very dangerous," the Emperor said. Adeyemi almost smiled. Only when the rule applies. The emperor thought about this for a long time after he left, sitting alone in the audience chamber with the quiet understanding of a man who has governed long enough to know that the most dangerous force in any system is not the one that is largest. It is the one that does not renegotiate.